Niluka.
Yeah. Thank you, Patricia. Hello to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome each one of you to the first webinar organized by the UISG Catholic Care for Children International on the continuum of care for the children. I am Sister Niluka Pereira, the coordinator of Catholic Care for Children International. I'm so excited to see you all. Thank you for joining with us today. Before we proceed with our work, let's take a few minutes to connect our hearts and minds with the Spirit who led all of us to be here to this moment today. Let us pause for a moment and become aware of the Spirit of God within us, among us, and all around us, inviting us to be open to the new ways of being and living out the charism of care in today's world. Pope Francis says, all charisms are the gifts that the Holy Spirit gives us. In the quiet of your heart, become aware of what calls you to be present at this moment. For most of us, it is our charism that has drawn us to this moment. The gift of charism is not static. It is dynamic, ever-changing, and calling us to embrace the new in the now. It is a call to build society in the here and now, a call to share the service of love in its unique and diverse forms. May we open our hearts to the Spirit who is inviting us within the context we are living in to share the gift of charism and respond to the cries of the little ones in our world. Spirit in our midst, awaken us to new vitality, arouse us with new energy, enthuse us with new conviction, link us in a spirit of togetherness, guide us in a spirit of wisdom, support us in a spirit of encouragement, inspire us, we pray, as co-workers searching for new ways to keep our charism of care for children and vulnerable persons alive into today's context. Amen. Thank you, friends. I now invite Sister Patricia Murray, the Executive Secretary of the UISG, to address the participants. Sister Pat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sister Niluka. It's nice to see so many who were perhaps on an earlier, when we launched an earlier webinar when we launched Catholic Care for Children International. And I think we were very aware that day that we were starting a new journey. This is the newest project of the International Union of Superiors General. And in a way, when we're beginning a new project, we're starting out on a new journey. It's a new adventure along the way. And we know that in a way, the desire to do something is growing within us over a number of years. And we see needs and we recognize that new steps need to be taken. And I think as we reflect on care for children in today's world, and particularly care in institutions, we realize that the words that are inviting us to really transition from institutional or residential care to care within families, that's a vision. It's not always possible because there are circumstances which make it impossible, but it is the goal and the desire. And it's also inviting us to find new ways and new methods of creating a family-like environment in which children who are vulnerable and in need can thrive. Recently, thinking about new initiatives, I said to myself, it needs a certain amount of risk and courage and collaboration and vision. And somebody begins to take the new step, and that person invites others to join and come along. And one by one, what was unique becomes something that many can join and participate in. And I was reading this poem the other day, which talked about this journey of a new beginning. Because in a way, with Catholic Care for Children International, we're capturing what's already happening in many parts of the world. Those of you who've had a vision, who've done something new, who've taken a new step, and we're particularly aware of what has been happening in Africa. But in a way, your initial steps are now calling to more of us to join together. So I just want you to listen to these few words. It's a poem called For a New Beginning. And it says, in out of the way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has already quietly been forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. Then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be at home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. So those beautiful words from the poet John O'Donoghue say something to us about the new that's growing within us, the whispers that we hear and the invitation to do something new, the courage we must have, the risk we must take, but the joy that will unfold and the newness that will flourish so that others may have life. And that's why we take these steps, so that young people, particularly vulnerable children and adolescents, may find life in new ways. And so today, I'm so delighted that we take another step on this journey and look forward to what we will learn today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sister Pat, for your reflection and inspiration. And thank you for your invitation for us to step into the unknown with faith and trust. Thank you. Before I give the floor to the speakers, let me share with you the mandate of Catholic Care for Children. I am sure some of you may have seen it in the UISG website. Patricia, will you show the slide? Catholic Care for Children is a sister-led, charism-driven movement to ensure children grow up in a safe, loving families. CCC will engage with national associations of religious and individual religious congregations to build their capacity to express the charism of care for children in today's world, to reduce resource to institutional care, and to encourage family and community-based care for children. Catholic Care for Children is built upon three main pillars. The first pillar is the Catholic faith, which includes the biblical mandate to care for children and vulnerable persons. The second pillar is the social sciences, which proves the importance of nurturing family for the holistic and healthy development of a child. The third pillar is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which spell out clearly the child rights to a family and the UN guidelines for alternative care of children. Grounded in these three pillars, CCC, Catholic Care for Children, is committed to promote continuum of care for children, which means if families are in distress, take steps to strengthen the families in order to prevent separation of children. If separation occurs, and always with the best interest of the child in mind, reunite the child with families or place child in permanent family-like settings. If alternative residential care is necessary, ensure care is of the highest quality and shortest in duration as possible. So today's webinar, we have focused on the continuum of care for the children. CCCI is an international platform of religious wants to provide the opportunities for the religious to reflect on their charism and learn from one another. For today's webinar, there are three guest speakers. As many of you know, the main speaker of today is Dr. Ruangula from Uganda. Also, we are happy to have today two religious sisters, Sister Tisa from the Sisters of St. Joseph, US, and Sister Shamindani Fernando from the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd, Sri Lanka. A warm welcome to our three guest speakers, and thank you for being with us today. After their presentation, the floor will be open for Q&A session. Now I invite Kathleen Mahoney to introduce the guest speaker of today to the floor.
Thank you, Sister Niluka. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Mahoney, and I'm a Senior Program Officer with the GHR Foundation. And it's been my pleasure to be working with the UISG, as well as the sisters in Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia, where Catholic Care for Children is up and flourishing. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce Dr. Ronald Luangula, who is going to speak to us today. We are delighted he can be with us today to help us to really appreciate ever more deeply how important it is that children can grow up in families or in family-like environments. Dr. Luangula is a lecturer in social work and social administration at McCreery University in Uganda. He has a doctorate in children's social protection and rights, and he has a master's degree in social work and human rights. In addition to his academic work, Dr. Luangula consults widely. He is a national child protection trainer, and he is a member of the National Child Protection Working Group in Uganda. He has been working closely with Catholic Care for Children in Uganda since the very first day. And we know that his training work that he has done with sisters and the consulting work he has done with the National Association have been a vital part of the very vital work they are doing in that country. So we are very glad to welcome Dr. Luangula this morning, who is going to speak to us about children's rights and a continuum of care that recognizes the role that family and community play for a child's well-being and healthy development. Over now to Dr. Ronald. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for that elaborate introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all members present here today. In recognition of all protocol and dignitaries that have made it to this day, which I consider quite important, given that it contributes to the debate about the rights of children deprived of family care, as well as the need to think and rethink about the way we care for children. I will be making a presentation on the continuum of care, and I seek to share my presentation now. Yes, I hope it's visible.
Yes, very good.
Good. So as I'll outline, I'll talk about the meaning of continuum of care, children's entitlement to growing up in a family environment, the position of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the UN guidelines on preference for family-based care. I will then move on to talk about the alternative care options that constitute the continuum of care, and end with a discussion, a presentation on changing the way we care and what it takes. When we talk about the continuum of care, we are talking about a range of alternative care options for children that have been separated from their parents for one reason or the other. The continuum of care acknowledges that there are a range of care options, but out of the many, priority is given to children growing up in family-based care options. And the continuum recognizes that sometimes some children drop out of family care when actually it would have been possible to strengthen the family and the children get an opportunity to remain within families. So it emphasizes the need to strengthen the capacity of families to care for children, strengthening the economic component, the protection component, skills component, and so on. But it also emphasizes gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is a key facet of the continuum of care. And by gatekeeping, we talk about taking all measures possible to see that only those children who must enter into alternative care actually do. Otherwise, those who can be diverted from entering into institutional care particularly are actually diverted to benefit from, for instance, family care by strengthening the capacity of the family, or at least other alternative care options than entering institutions. And gatekeeping also emphasizes thinking about the services available that the child could benefit from. They could be from the government, could be from the civil society, that otherwise would have been the reason for the child's entry into care. Children have got a right to grow up in a family environment. And this cuts across all children, regardless of their parental status. So it doesn't matter whether the child's parents are living, whether the child's family is violent and abusive. We are saying the child has a right to live within a family setting. By family setting, we don't necessarily mean the biological family. It could be other options, but which take a form of family care rather than non-family based care options. And the reasons are very clear. The family remains a natural environment for the growth, well-being, and protection of children. And indeed, there is a range of international human rights and legal instruments that underscore the essence of recognition of the family as a place for children to be and as a place where parents should take responsibility to care for and protect the children, but with the support of the state. Taking a case of the CRC as one of the international human rights instruments, in its preamble, paragraph 6, it is quite explicit about the family that for the full and harmonious development of the child's personality, the child should grow up in a family environment, in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. We know that, for instance, in an institution, a child might find happiness or could find love from the caregivers, yes. But this institution cannot substitute the family. It cannot assure the child of his development, full development of his or her personality. That's why the emphasis on family-based care, family-based care. Not that institutions don't have a role to play, but yes, the family takes precedence. The CRC also recognizes the role of parents and members of the extended family and community members to support in the upbringing of children. And in this, we see kinship. And Article 9 is very, very critical for us who are in the area of caring for children deprived of family care. It underlines that undue separation of children from their parents is prohibited, except if such separation is in the child's best interest. Otherwise, it is not called for. And just in case that, yes, the child is separate from his or her parents, the child remains entitled to regular contact with his or her family, except if such contact is not in the child's best interest. For instance, in a case where the father is molesting the child, and that's the reason for the child's separation, or where the family has sided with the father, even when they know is abusive, but they're interested in safeguarding the father's name and the family's name. In that case, it may not be in the child's best interest. And Article 20 of the CRC provides for alternative care for children deprived of a family environment, and suggests a range of care options, including foster placement, Kafalah of Islamic law, adoption, and if necessary, and as a last resort, institutional care placement. The same convention underlines that as we consider the different care options for children deprived of family care or parental care, we should be thinking about whether or not those care options being considered support and enhance the child's upbringing, his or her ethnic, religious, cultural, and linguistic background. The other international instrument, international framework rather on alternative care, and the UN guidelines on the same. These come as an extension of Article 20 of the CRC. These re-echo the family as a natural environment for the growth and well-being and protection of children. And thus, the guidelines emphasize that efforts should be directed towards enabling children remain in their families. And in the event that they are separated, there should be deliberate effort to see that the children get back, they return to the care of their parents and, where appropriate, other close family members. That is very pertinent. Yes, so the guidelines entitle children to growing up in a supportive and protective care environment, and preferably that is family-based. The UN guidelines also articulate a range of care principles, which we should consider in the determination of whether or not the child needs alternative care, and in consideration of the different care options. One of the principles is necessity. The question is that which we should be asking ourselves, is it necessary that the child is separated from his or her parents? Or rather, it's that the family just needs support. Then appropriateness, how appropriate is the care option being considered, especially to the child's age, child's culture, language, religion, and so on. And when separation happens, the child, like we say, deserves to be granted. And then the other question or principle that is the best interest of the child. And where we are considering alternative care, we are saying preference should be given family-based care option, and institutional care should only come as a last resort. And the financial and material poverty should never be seen as a justification for separating a child from his or her parents or family. And where there are children with existing bonds, these may be siblings or even not necessarily siblings, but with existing bonds, we are saying it is paramount that they are not separated. And in the process, there should be no ulterior motives in consideration of alternative care options. And each case is unique, and that should be handled as so. So we talk about case-by-case determination in consideration of alternative care for children. What about in the event that separation is unavoidable? We are saying, or we are re-emphasizing that family-based alternative care options should be considered. And in the event that the child ends up into a residential care facility, then that facility should not be seen as a provider of long-term care to the child, but rather it should serve as a transitional care facility to that effect. What do we mean? We mean that the moment the child is entering the institution, we should already be seeing him or her out of the institution. So the care plan for the child should be having a goal of seeing the child out of the institution, back into the child's family, or at least into an alternative family-based care option. Yes, there we are. And we switch to the continuum of care, the different care options. There are several that we shall be talking about. Kinship care, foster care, small group homes, adoption or Kafalah of Islamic law, supported child-head households, supported independent living, guardianship, and residential care. And in this presentation, I adopted a diagrammatic expression of the continuum of care by Bankers 2019. Bankers identifies a range of care options, yes. And in these care options, with the exception of adoption, she argues that all effort should be seen to see that the child gets back to his or her birth family. That's very important. Where the child is in kinship, as long as the birth family is available, of course, there are circumstances where it is not possible, but where possible, or where we need to do basically something to see that the family takes up the child, we should be seeing the child supported and the family supported to see that the two reunite. So whether in kinship, whether in Kafalah, whether in guardianship, small groups, and so on. And institutional care, as we can see, is at the periphery, and it is the list is seeing efforts being made to see that he or she gets back to the birth family, or at least into the other alternative family-based care options, but not keeping in the institution for a long time, but rather as maybe a matter of emergency, or as the child is on transition. GHR also shares with us a framework for understanding the continuum of care. And yes, in this framework, we see the least preferred option being institutional care. And as we said, it should be very short term. It should be temporary. When a child is in institutional care, we should be seeing efforts, deliberate efforts, so that he or she is given an opportunity to get into any of the family-based care options with the ultimate goal of the child being reunited with his or her birth family. So we see the least preferred being institutional care and the most preferred being the child's birth family where it is possible. And I keep saying where it is possible because it's not obvious that every child has got a chance to be in his or to get back to his or her birth family. To throw some light about the respective care options, kinship is duly recognized, even when it is informal, it is duly recognized under RC. And it involves the members of the extended family and the community to care for a child. Meanwhile, even when the child is under kinship, the child's connectedness with his or her family is paramount. And we also talk about godparents. They can also be seen as providers of kinship care, especially if they are within the community. We may not need to secure formal care arrangement. The godparents can offer that informal care. Moving on to foster care, we observe that in the event that kinship is not possible, then we should be thinking about foster care as an immediate alternative. This, however, is temporary for a defined period of time. And in the event that parents are leaving, we should be seeing ourselves aiming so that the child gets back to the birth family. And the foster care could all take different forms. It could be emergency foster care. It could be fostering to adopt, yes. Sometimes people foster with no intention to adopt on a short term or on a long-term basis. It is a good arrangement because it is family-based. Then we have small group homes, yes. These are also a good model. They offer something close to a family. So they offer a family-like environment, not necessarily a real family, but it's family-like. So instead of children being taken up, for example, in institutions, at least they are given an opportunity to be cared for in a family-like environment, which is good. So we see small families bringing together children from different backgrounds, but the common or the denominator is that they have lost parental care or they are at risk, so they are cared for by a caring adult. We see one example of the organization that adopted this model is SOS Children's Villages. Although the downside to this, we have sometimes argued that children in a family-like environment, in as much as they have often the female mother figure, they often don't have the male father figure. And so children keep questioning if that's what they are growing up seeing, especially if they stay there for a long time. What message are we sending to them in terms of future relationships? So that at times becomes an issue. But yes, at least they offer an opportunity for children to be cared for, not necessarily in an institutional setting. Adoption is another form which normally precedes fostering. I say it precedes fostering because for any person to adopt, he or she must have fostered a child for a defined period of time, depending on the period defined in the national laws of the respective country. Meanwhile, as the adoptive parents or the intending adoptive parents foster, the social welfare officer monitors and makes reports that are important for court eventually to determine whether this intending adoptive parent is granted an adoption order or not. But once granted, it means that the adoptive parents permanently take over the care responsibility for the child, as though this child is their own, their biological child. And the child also enjoys the rights being a child born by a parent. Can have inheritance rights, rights to inherit a name, inherit property, and so on. And the birth parents lose parental rights and obligations over the child. That's why in some countries, emphasis is on adoption can happen for children whose parents are not known, or efforts to find them have proven futile. And we are saying adoption cannot be considered as an emergency measure. Never. And then we have a possibility for domestic adoption, but also inter-country adoption. Preference is given to domestic adoption. Remember, we talked about the principle of appropriateness. Domestic adoption is often appropriate to the child because the adoptive family normally could be sharing a lot in terms of linguistic, in terms of culture, religion, and so on, and even the context compared to inter-country adoption. Kafalah is another alternative care option typical within Islamic communities. In this case, a family takes in abandoned children who are deprived of the family environment. However, this under Kafalah, well, the family that takes up the child really provide for this child as though the child is their own. The child doesn't have entitlement to taking up the family name and perhaps the family inheritance, and that distinguishes it from adoption, yes. But at least it demonstrates the commitment to care for children, to maintain children, to offer them education, which otherwise they will not have had a chance to access. This is typical of Islamic communities. For example, when you get to Zanzibar in Tanzania, which is about over 95% Muslim community, they don't talk about adoption, but kafala. Then supported head households. Yes, there are some children who may lose parental care when they are relatively older, for instance, maybe 14 years. In such a case, the kin relatives or potential foster and adoptive parents might be reluctant to take on such children because they feel they may not be able to instill wanted among these children. Yet the children deserve to benefit from alternative care. So the option is to support them within their own households to benefit from alternative care. The other option is supported independent living, yes. Some children, again, as they are approaching adulthood, they need to be prepared to transition into responsible adults and independent persons. So one way to prepare them for that, we see an option of care, which is independent living. They are supported to live on their own. And some of the support they may need could be housing assistance, meeting basic needs, life skills, vocational skills, training, business skills, and financial skills, language competence, yes, because this also undermines children's reintegration. Connecting them with mentors, career opportunities, knowledge about the law, such that when they leave care, they are not ending up behind the bars. Then knowledge about existing government programs that they can benefit them for socioeconomic empowerment. Guardianship is another option where an adult is legally appointed as a representative for the child in different ways and in different forums. So somebody is legally appointed and takes up the parental responsibility for the child. And in some cases where guardianship is not provided for in the legal system, social welfare officers normally stand in for the children. Even when it's a matter of court, the social welfare officer remains obliged to find a legal representative for the child for that matter. Then we move on to residential care or institutional care, which we are saying in the continuum of care should come as a last resort because among the rest, this is not family-based. So a child is placed in a residential care facility and at least gets a chance to have a roof over him. Otherwise, maybe he will not be or spending the night under a culvert. We see this in developing countries. So at least institutions offer that opportunity for the children to be cared for. We are saying it should ideally be a temporary arrangement. And we do take note that whereas many residential care facilities are referred to as children's homes, they are not, and they don't constitute a family-based care option. We do note that, yes, Not all care institutions are harmful, but yes, it is agreeable that care institutions can have adverse effects on children's development, given that have a chance to have individualized attention from caregivers, because the caregiver is tending to many children, and before children get used to one caregiver, the shift is changing, or maybe one caregiver that children have been used to has gotten another job and things of the kind. And we also see children being detached from their own extended families, from their communities of origin, from the community around the care institution, because there is a perimeter fence. The child doesn't have a chance to interface with other children in the neighborhood. Institutions, the care they provide is also noted to be inappropriate and rarely in the best interest of the individual child. Research also indicates a range of impacts, negative impacts on the children's physical, social, cognitive, behavior, emotional development, and attachment relationships. Yet again, it is costly. The cost of caring for a single child in an institution could perhaps benefit the whole entire household if it was directed to the family setting. And to the sisters, we also observe that institutional care puts the sisters who are caring for the children to be on their toes. They are always struggling to see that they are not operating out of the bounds of the law. They are struggling to see that they are maintaining the standards. This is not easy. They don't get that much time to rest because the children are in institutions. Yet, if they were within families, they wouldn't be as much on their toes. And thus, we make a reference to the UNICEF recommendation that calls upon never to put children who are under 3 years in the residential care institutions. And if really they must, because there are some circumstances where it is inevitable. For example, where a child's mother dies at birth, we are saying this should be a last resort, but also for the shortest time possible. Now, as we move towards the end, sometimes the question is, the way we speak about institutions, does it mean that child care institutions have no more place in the care for children without parental care? And we say, no, that isn't the case. That isn't the case. There are really some children that need to be taken into institutions. And I give an example of many African countries. Police, for instance, receives the children that are lost, children that have been neglected, that need emergency care. Yet the police stations don't have reception centers. So where can such children be taken? That's the option is institutions, at least as a matter of emergency. Although we said they should be offering temporary care and they should be positioning themselves as transitional care facilities as opposed to providing long-term care. Having heard the desirability, but also the downside of institutional care, we are saying we need to change the way we care. But how do we do it? First, we say we need to strengthen our gatekeeping practices. We need to say that, one, we emphasize that only those children who must get into institutions actually do so. And even only those children who should be separate from their families are really separated. But where we can simply offer services to the family, build the capacity of the family, provide basic services that children are seeking for in institutions, then we know we should be making efforts that the children don't get out of the families. So, for instance, when families need material support, if they are deserving, which could be short-term, we may need to provide daycare facilities. For instance, children with disabilities can benefit from this instead of being dumped and ending up into institutions. We may need to target those families that are likely to place their children in residential care facilities. with programs such as child care, job training, counseling, economic strengthening, parenting training, and then education support for these children, but while they are commuting from home to school rather than being in institutions. And then creating awareness among parents and communities that it is better for a child to be cared for in the family than being in the institution. And for that matter, we say we need to prioritize economic stability and security of the household. And we provide a range of examples of such possible interventions, some of which I've talked about, and others I provide in this slide, such as employment support and skills training, linking households to community and government programs and resources, then vocational apprenticeship, life skills training for the caregivers, but also for younger people who are transitioning into adulthood. So what does it take then to change the way we care? One, we are saying we need to appreciate and acknowledge that majority of the children in institutions do have families or relatives. Many times we ignore this, but they do have families and relatives. At least research shows that. We need to acknowledge that. And if they do, then why should we be taking them to institutions, for instance, ignoring the families? Yet the quantum of care is telling us that the institution should come as a last resort. So we need to recheck ourselves. Then we need to appreciate that the reasons for admission into institutional care are more to do with the family poverty on one hand and availability of residential care facilities on the other hand, as opposed to unavoidable separation. That's critical. Then we need to acknowledge that many admissions could be prevented if the family received even what could seem to be minimal or modest support. So we could invest more in building the capacity of families than letting them get shattered and we absorb the shock into institutions. Then we need to acknowledge and appreciate that the care reform agenda is real. The agenda, the care reform emphasizes the need to systematically and gradually deinstitutionalize without necessarily causing harm to children. The other thing we need to appreciate is that due to the changing times, due to the changing legal and policy landscape, and with the evidence from research on the negative impact of institutionalization on children, we certainly need to do things differently. We need to de-institutionalize. And only those children that must get into institutions as a matter of emergency or as a way of transitioning them into alternative family options really get in. But also for providers of institutional care to remain relevant while working within the bounds of international alternative care standards, there is need to change the way we care. And very importantly, we need to acknowledge that by caring for children from within their families or at least communities, the religious can really maintain their charism of caring for children and other vulnerable persons. Caring for children from within families doesn't take away, doesn't change, doesn't erode the charisma of the religious. And then to acknowledge that it is possible to transition institutions into providers of short-term, emergency, and transitional care for separated children, as opposed to long-term care. I would like to thank you very much for listening to me. It has been a rather long presentation, but I thank you for your audience and patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ronald Luangula, for this wonderful presentation. You've made a very powerful presentation that's reminded us about the importance of being attentive to children and their right to grow up in a family. And you've made a very strong case for prioritizing family and community care, especially when we're thinking about children who are vulnerable. So on behalf of all of us who are gathered here on the screen and from across the world, thank you very, very much.
My
We
pleasure.
now, we now have an opportunity to hear from a sister, Sister Tisa Fitzgerald. She is a sister of St. Joseph from New York, and she is the executive director of Our Children. This is a program that helps to keep families united. These are families where mothers have been serving time in prison. And how do we keep children and mothers together? And how do we reunite them? This work began in the 1980s when Sister Tisa and a few other children began an award-winning and an amazing ministry that has helped keep those families together. The sisters themselves began taking in children while their mothers were in prison. And that has grown into a wonderful, wonderful program called Our Children. And it is a way that the Sisters of St. Joseph continue their charism of caring for their dear neighbors. And so we're going to begin. I believe we have a short video of Sister Tisa and her ministry, and then we will have her speak to us. Once again, thank you, Dr. Ronald. And now we turn it over to hear from a sister who is living what Dr. Ronald has been talking about. Thank you.
When I was really praying about the choice to leave formal education and go into this work, I realized that the work I'm doing now is education. It's about leading people. That's the word education, the beauty of the word education. Leading people to a better place for themselves and their children. I continue to educate every day, and I am educated. I'm Sister Tisa Fitzgerald, and I am the Executive Director of Our Children. The Our Children, H-O-U-R, really tells our story. We work with children whose lives are governed by the hour their mother was arrested, the hour that they visit in prison, and the more hopeful hour of reunification. We incarcerate more people in the United States than any civilized country in the world. We have 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's incarceration. And in 1995, it became very, very clear to me there were so many women who were ready to come out of prison who had no place to go. A deliberate decision was made to really establish Our Children as a charity, and the heart of what we do is provide a home. We soon opened a daycare program. We have a licensed after-school program. Now we currently have 3 thrift shops, and 90% of the people who operate the thrift shops are our former clients. So the women here provide a sense of hope, and that enlivens them and it enables them to move forward with their life. In New York State, sadly, the recidivism rate is about 35 to 40% for women. And here in Our Children, our recidivism rate has been 3%. So you really need a support system. It has to be tangible. It has to be personal. Your name and who you are is important. Your story is certainly a sacred story. We have to respect who you are and where you've come from and where you want to go. God's really asking us to give back. I always have a deep sense of gratitude and awe at God using me to be a vehicle for the work that is so necessary here, and also the faith of other people that I work with. When I sit back and I look at their actions and what they did for another person, and I know that it's generated by a deep love of God. And that's what motivates me, that when I see a woman who comes in here after 5 years in prison, her teaching me about virtues of humility and patience and kindness, I sit back when she walks out that door and I say, just another lesson learned, God. Oh boy. Hello, everybody from New York. It's good to see you all. And I have great memories of my trip to Rome, where I learned so much from each of you. I'm happy just to share with you some of my story, our story. But I do have to say that Dr. Ronald
in your explaining the continuum of care that is the goal for CCC, it really has been the journey of the American child care system. We have gone through so much of that. And here we are today in 2020, and we still have so many issues around childcare. So while it is a daunting task, small steps can be taken, and they can be successful for the life and the good well-being of children. And I certainly continue to and urge you to continue on that journey. It's a challenging one, but it certainly is a rewarding one. As Kathleen said, the story of our children, and my Irish mother wants to make sure you know that it's H-O-U-R, because it tells the story of the life of a child whose hours govern her life or their lives. The hour the mother is arrested and there is separation, the hour the child can go visit the mother in prison, and most importantly, the hour when there can be family reunification on the outside. And in 1986, myself and 4 other Sisters of St. Joseph responded to the need of foster care children, for the most part, who were in foster care systems that they were being cared for if you looked at their physical needs, but the emotional need of where their mother was and the care and respect that the system did not have for mothers who are incarcerated. And I think that's a constant in any culture across our world, that too often mothers and fathers, when they are incarcerated, they're sort of out of sight, out of mind. And the child's experience of the trauma, the fear, the unknown, the negativity, all of the isms that surround that child's life were very present in the foster care system at the time in 1986. So our goal in taking children, we took them out of foster homes with a commitment to keep them in relationship to their mothers. And that's the key here, relationship. No matter where you are in the world, no matter who you are, whether you're rich or poor, a child needs a relationship, a real bonding with a mother or a father or someone else who is in their lives. That's a meaningful thing. Priority is always given to the biological mothers. And even though our mothers were in prison, that was not being done. So what we did, we opened a house for children whose mothers were in prison. We were able to have 10 to 12 children at any given time. We became licensed as foster mothers, and that was a real rude awakening. I thought going to college and getting a degree and a master's was challenging, but working at home with literally raising 10 to 12 children was probably the greatest challenge of my life and the greatest learning of my life. But over the course of the years, we did that for 10 years, and we made a commitment. We went inside the prisons to meet the mothers, make sure the child was bonded to that mother. And we did that, I'd say, rather successfully, and saw many happy endings where mothers could come out with a child, and the child knew the mother, and then they would go off and live somewhere. But over the course of time, it was kind of clear there was nowhere for people to go, that we had made great efforts to strengthen the bond with mothers and children, to help the children over the fear and the unknown and the trauma, that they had a mother who loved them and they loved their mother, but then where would they go when they came out? Because again, in the 80s and the 90s, we had the explosion of drugs and the epidemic of addiction across our country that remains today and across our world. So it was very evident we needed homes. And that really became the new mission, or the refocused mission of our children, to establish homes for mothers to come to so that they could continue to grow in a bond of family with their child. Or in many cases, in the prison system in New York, we have a prison nursery where a pregnant mother is arrested, might be pregnant, she gives birth to a baby. She's able to keep the baby for a year inside the prison nursery, bond closely with that baby. And then when her time is up to come out with the baby, where do they go to have a safe, secure home? Or sometimes that child has to be sent home before the mother because the mother's time is not up. So that we also became a home for those children. So we would care for a baby, continue to visit and keep that bond with the mother and child. So when the mother came out, she could come and live in one of our homes with her child. And that became really the essence of what we do today. And I think for all of you, that's a model that can be replicated, because what we found out is the spirit of community. And we can all relate to that in our religious lives or in our family lives. So that a mother would come out to a home that we've established. We now have 9 of them, 9 homes where maybe 8 to 10 families can live together in community. So you have mother, and we've had a few fathers. We don't specialize in fathers, we specialize in mothers, but we've had a few fathers, and certainly that can be done in your own lands where you have homes for just fathers, because as stated, so many children have a family, a parent, but a parent who doesn't have the proper home, doesn't have the proper skills, is afraid of raising children, and really cannot do it alone. So the houses that we have now, we have 8 to 10 mothers. They come either with a baby from the prison nursery to raise, or they're reunited with children in foster care. And that's a critical piece here, because those children, more than anyone, need a sense of security and belonging. So we'll have a mother, we make the commitment, if we know the mother is going to be coming out to live in one of our houses, we make sure that those children in foster care go up to visit the mother in prison. So they become very familiar, that bond is strengthened. The children know they have a mother who loves them. They know there's hope on the horizon when the reunification can happen, and they can see the house where that's going to happen. So we have a sense of community, 8 to 10 mothers. They share, and this is really where the learning takes place and the commitment. We talk about cost. This is much less expensive than massive institutions. You have a home where a mother can have a room with a child or a room with 2 children, sometimes more. There's a case manager, a social worker who's working with these families to learn how to be parents, because everybody doesn't come with the parentship, as we know. That takes training and teaching, making mistakes, learning how to talk them through, but having somebody there who believes in the relationship of mothers and children. And they help routinize their days. They talk about cleaning, they talk about routines, getting children to school, getting children to daycare, having a conversation about their own role and how they're going to be caregivers, what job training program they're going to be in, what education programs they need. So it's done in a familiar setting. And after maybe, and again, takes some women 6 months to get that. Other women, it takes 2 years. So there is no time limit on how long they can stay in that environment. But then we have the ability to move them when they're ready to a more independent type of home, and then ultimately to their own independent living. But they have established a sense of community and support, that the social workers that were present at the beginning are still there when they're off independent. When there are issues around children, we have child therapists that can help the family and the child through that, education specialists who can talk about the ongoing educational needs of the children. We have practical things like a food pantry and thrift shops for clothing, job training program for women that can really give them a sense of hope. And again, working with families in therapy where the child is knowing they're doing their thing educationally, mom is doing that, and together they're going to build a future. And all of the issues around incarceration eventually fade away as the strength of the family happens. And that's really what we've done. And we have many, many wonderful stories to tell. One of the strong issues, and I'm sure you face it also, I know the HIV issue is a large one in many of your areas, but addiction. And we have relapse, and that happens, and that's almost a necessary step for some women in their recovery programs. But once they're in that communal setting, if a mother relapses, and this just happened about 3 weeks ago, and it's happened more with the COVID virus because of depression and anxiety. That child can remain in that home with the familiar setting of caregiving and knowing that their mom has been ill, however you want to tell the story, but the mother eventually can come back to that setting and the child's security is there. We make sure that the children can visit the mom if she's in a rehab program or whatever. But again, it's the community, takes a community and a village to raise a child. So that's a very important part of the process. And we have mothers who get sick for some reason, need hospitalization. The same thing goes. The community is there to care for that child. I mentioned about fathers. Sadly, many of our children do not have fathers or do not know their fathers. But if we do have that, there is a commitment to make sure the child grows in a relationship to that parent also. And we relish when we get a father who's really interested in taking on that role with their child. So it's not an easy thing to do, but we've done what we can do. When I was in Rome, I encouraged all of you to look inside your prisons, go behind prison walls, find the women who are there, who are mothers and who care passionately about their children and really want somebody to be interested in them. The other thing that we've been doing parallel to caring for mothers and children and strengthening families is advocating inside prisons for programs that really speak to family growth, that make sure prison counselors, and we have staff now running programs in our women's prison, who make an effort to find out where women's children are, to give commitment through telephoning or Zooming, transportation. We bring up children prior to COVID every week to spend time with their mothers so that there is a sense of security in a child to know my mom may have made a mistake, she still loves me, and I'm not responsible for that mistake. I had nothing to do with it. And the fear and the trauma of having my mother in prison is lessened because I'm building that relationship with her. So I encourage you to do that, to look what you can be advocating inside. We've done a lot of work. It's still not over. We have lots more to do. And on the legislative level, the commitment of resources of your city, state, country to care for children whose mothers or fathers are incarcerated in the same manner they would do if their mothers or father had illnesses that needed to be taken care of. So I continue on that path. I work with wonderful people who have the mission of the Sisters of St. Joseph, care of the dear neighbor. And I have come to know and love the dear neighbor behind bars as well as outside in the community. And I'm very grateful for your work. And if my experience can in any way help or support you, I certainly am here to do that. I could go on forever, so I have to stop.
Sister Tisa, thank you for speaking with us today, for inspiring us, for reminding me and all of us about maybe the most vulnerable, not just women and children, but the prisoner that we are encouraged in the Gospels to care for. Thank you so much. Thank you for this inspiration and the wonderful work that you're doing. It really is an embodiment of all that Dr. Ronald was speaking of, about when children are separated, how to make sure that they are really cared for in a family-like an environment, and then reunited with their mothers and sometimes their fathers as well.
Right.
So
and the model is replicable. Make sure that is known. The model can be replicated. When there's a commitment, or as Pat said in the beginning, the risk, the courage, the vision, it can be done.
Thank you, Tisa. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sister Niluka, and we have another sister who's going to share some of her ministry as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks to Dr. Ronald and Sister Tisa for your inspiring sharing. And thank you. It was wonderful. So our third speaker of today is Sister Shamindani Fernando. We are very fortunate to have Sister Shamindani with us today. Sister Shamindani is from Sri Lanka, belonging to the Good Shepherd congregation. She is a social worker and a lawyer. She is the Good Shepherd Sri Lanka Mission Development Officer and the coordinator of community-based project. She has many years of experiences in working with the children in the orphanages. So today she will share with us the transitioning of child care in Good Shepherd Sri Lanka. Over to you, Sister Shamindani.
Thank you, Sister Niluka, for the introduction. And further, I take this opportunity to thank the UISG CCCI for inviting me for this learning forum. Hi, everyone. I'm here to share with you what Good Shepherd Sri Lanka has done in the last few years in transitioning of childcare in Sri Lanka. Good Shepherd Sri Lanka has 150 years of long history for enhancing and uplifting thousands of underprivileged and neglected children from the society. Good Shepherd Sri Lanka began this work with basic education, and later the services engrossed many other needs of the children. We were the pioneers to initiate the institutional care for the children. This was the main strategy that have adopted in the protection by the province until 2016. In 2016, GSSL residential care statistics are as follows. We had 13 child development centers, 1 safe home, 1 detention home, 3 skill development centers, and 9 hostels. All these residential institutions cater to varied categories of children. By the year 2016, we didn't have any community-based child protection programs run by GSSL. Having such an institutionalized mission structure, what made us take this drastic shift towards deinstitutionalization, or talking about family and community-based care for children? This is what led the Good Shepherd Sri Lanka for this transition. There was a realization in the province and also at the level of the congregation in working towards mission effectiveness. In 2013, the province chapter directives called the province to review its ministries. In 2015, the Good Shepherd Congregational Directive Statement invited all the units to develop clear strategic plan integrating spirituality, justice, peace with best ministry practices. Following these guidelines, the childcare ministry of the province was evaluated and developed a strategy plan. This plan compelled the sisters to find an alternative systematic approach to serve the children in a better way. In addition, it forced the sisters to address the child protection issues in comprehensive and sustainable manner, to emphasize the role of the parents' responsibility. Furthermore, it affirmed the need of working with the government in parallel to enhance the child protection system in all levels. The strategy plan showed us 2 directions to start with. One is applying the best ministry practices in running of the institution. The second is finding alternative care for the children. This gave the birth to Good Shepherd community-based child protection programs. At the inception of this strategic plan, everything was confused and puzzled to all of us, sisters and partners in mission. This demanded a lot of hard work, and there were many dialogues, discussions, and reflections before initiating of this plan. And we received many help from internal and external expertise. This is the first approach in the transition, applying best ministry practices in our ministry. These are some of the best ministry practices that the Good Shepherd Sri Lanka has tried to implement in the process. Shifting from charity-based approach to right-based approach, this required shifting from ministry practices as well as our attitude and our thinking patterns. Also to consider the best interest of the child in making decisions and upholding the child rights in the families, adopting an effective case file management, developing program policy and a child protection policy, initiating a care and reintegration plan for each child, applying multidisciplinary approach and employing professional staff, creating child-friendly atmosphere wherever the members work with the children. As I mentioned earlier, it was not an easy task for Good Shepherd Sri Lanka to implement all these best practices. Bring changes at the beginning, always chaotic. There were many challenges, even though it seems to be so simple. The experiences of childcare ministry in long years have led Good Shepherd Sri Lanka to adopt and develop some certain practices in the ministry. So it was not easy to adopt something very new. First of all, it was difficult to convince the province on effectiveness of the transition, as there were less or no exposure for the alternative care for the children. And there was so much of resistance from our own sisters towards the change. There was a great reluctance from our part in accepting this change, since we lacked the trust for change. Of course, lack of skills and capacity was one of the drawbacks in applying the best practices. And this includes lack of skillful personnel. Less cooperation from the government officers and resistance from institutional church also stood as a challenge. These challenges made the transition process slow and initiating right-based approach in child care ministry. Here, I would like to share the process of transitioning from residential care to family-based care. To begin with, the Good Shepherd Sri Lanka decided to close down some of the institutions. It started preparing all the stakeholders who were responsible and involving in the ministry, like government officers, parent and the guardians, caregivers, the sisters, as well as including the child. Individual encounters and group meetings were conducted until the best solution is identified. In the process, we were able to surface the risk factors such as protection issues, educational issues, and taken steps to mitigate those risks. In this transitioning process, we realized that some families were in need of financial support and social services. Good Shepherd Sri Lanka attended in creating a support structure for them before we reintegrating the child to the families. Follow-up and monitoring procedure help both family and the child to adapt with the transition. In this process, We were excited to see how child is happy in the family and enjoying the company of the family members. Here, I'm going to talk about the second approach towards family-based care, especially about community-based child protection program in Sri Lanka. How the community-based child protection programs connects to this transition process. When Good Shepherd Sri Lanka select a community for community-based child protection program, the most vulnerable communities are identified from where the children come to the institution. Through CBCP programs, the push factors or the root causes are identified for a family to seek the institutional care for the children. As an example, many girls came to the safe home from a particular fishing community from where child rights violations were reported. After conducting a child rights situational analysis, the Good Shepherd decided to initiate a community-based child protection in this area, so the push factors were treated well. Community-based child protection programs aim at developing the whole community. The programs adopt a child-centered approach where the child development is given more prominent, while the community is made aware and equipped with capacities to protect their children. The right holders, the children, are made aware and capable of protecting themselves and others, and also empowered to claim their rights and trained to fulfill their responsibilities. The government officials and other stakeholders are pulled out to carry out their responsibilities. It creates a strong network between the community and the government personnel and the department that are responsible for protecting of the child. The long-lasting aim of the program is are protected and their rights are upheld. It is not just changing the outer appearance or reaching of some superficial change. It is bringing about changes in their behaviors and of their attitudes which last from their lifetime and will pass many generations to come. That is the beauty of the CBCP programs. What are the differences between these two options, family or community-based care and institutional care? This can be a repetition, but still it is good to emphasize. When it comes to institutional care, the parent and the caregivers are set apart from their primary responsibility, and family ties, emotional bonds are loosened, and the child becomes a just visitor to a family and the community. In an institutional setting, less attempts have made to work with the family or the community, where finally the child has to go and live. That affect the child's whole well-being and the future. Whereas the community-based child protection programs target the entire community and focus the empowerment of all units that surround the child. It strengthens the family to take the responsibility in upbringing the child within the family setting. By now, you may be thinking how successful we are in this process. This slide shows the outcome of this transition process. In 2016, there were 13 child development centers, and by 2020, the Good Shepherd Sri Lanka was able to close down one center and place the children in the families. There were no CBCP programs at 2016. It is happy to say that there are 5 CBCP programs function at this moment, serving 2,638 individuals, especially catering to 1,500 children from different communities. These slides elaborate the number of direct program participants. This includes 755 women and 383 men at the time of 2020. CBCP is a very effective approach in protecting the children within the family system. Our founder, St. Mary Euphrasia, says, "Though all stars may burn out and die, look to new horizon and even beyond." So let's journey towards finding new horizon and even beyond to give best place for the children who are living in our institutional settings. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Sister Chamindani, sharing shepherd experiences in transitioning of childcare in Sri Lanka. You have highlighted the challenges and the benefits towards moving from institutional care to community-based care for children. The progress is slow, but the good news is that you have begun the journey to change the way you care for children. Thank you, sister, for coming to this forum and sharing your rich experience. Now it is time for the participants to engage with the speakers. So now, Patricia, could you please help us to know how we can proceed with the Q&A session?
Yes, there are various options to ask questions or comment. You can write in the chat, or you can ask the flow, and there is an icon where you can raise your hand, because if you raise your hand here, we can't see you perhaps, or write in the chat asking the flow, and we can open the microphone. I hope I'm clear, so we can leave some seconds to think, because we listen so many experiences. There is a question, but we can't see the name of the person. So I would like to ask the person to rename herself. Okay, we see them. Okay, wonderful. Sister, you can unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm Sister Euphrasia. I'm the Director, Catholic Care for Children, Uganda. I'm happy and I really appreciate all the presentations made. There is a lot that we have learned. I have a question to Sister Chamindani. That is also a challenge to us in Uganda. While we are for transitioning that children should be placed in families, there is a challenge of the use of the big structures that have been housing so many children. The sisters are failing almost to part with these children, and when we are sharing with them, they are not yet there as to what they shall use the structures for. I would love to learn from Sister Chamindani, when they closed the residential care, what did they use the structures for? Because now for us here, it is a big challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sister, for raising the question. I think it was not at all easy because we had to go through many process. First, we have to engage with the government officers. We call it in Sri Lanka probation officers, and the department. That is a department which directly work with the children. So they were not that happy when we closed down even one center. We are having so many centers, but even they were not happy to close down one center, one institution. But still, like we were very much convinced, and our conviction made us to convince them. So we explained to them what exactly we are going to do with the children as they are placed in the families. The benefits that the child is going to get. So there was so much of discussions that we have to had with the government officers, and also with the families, because the parents, the single parents, they find it difficult to take the child back to the family, because she has to, or he has to work, plus he has to look after the child. So at this scenario, we have to work with the family. We have to find out different support system for the child. As an example, so one mother was saying it was hard for her to get the child from the school. So then we have to go through searching for the family ties and see who will be available to get the child to the home. And there was relatives, so we were able to link that. And even in another case, we had to find out transport system. So in such a way, we were able to place the children, and even after placing them, and even the parents used to call us and share the difficulties. So in all that events, we had to intervene. So it was a process, ongoing process, sister. Thank you.
Thank you, sister.
Sorry, the question is the use of the residential structures, the houses where children were accommodated.
Yeah.
That's where the challenge is that the sisters, the structures, the houses, the accommodation structure, how do you turn it into what?
Okay.
Yes.
Sister is asking that what we will do with the buildings.
Yes, with the
once
buildings.
Closed down.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest repurposing, because that's what we've done with many buildings that we have. Huge, big convents have been repurposed to accommodate family units. And then that gives the availability of not only a home, but also support, so that if a mother can't go pick up a child from school, one of the other mothers within that community could do that. And that would give them a chance to strengthen their life skills as well as their community-based focus. So repurposing buildings is something that can be done, again, with some money and some vision.
Thank you, sisters. There are various questions, Sister Niluka, in the chat. While Claudia gets ready to read a couple of questions for our speakers, I just would like to reassure the participants that we will able to make available the presentation and PowerPoint. So, and the recordings of the webinar in 4 languages.
Thank you, Patrizia. And I will now read 2 questions, and I will leave space for whoever would like to answer among our speakers today. So first of all, we have a question if it is possible to better define the concept of best interest. And the second one we have is if it is possible to explain a little more about community-based child protection.
I feel that shall we ask Dr. Ruangula to answer the best interest of the child.
Yes, sister. Thank you very much. Thank you to the co-presenters and the participants who really have showed interest in our presentation. The best interest of the child is one of the principles of child protection that is taken care of in Article 3 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It underlines the welfare of the child. The issue is that sometimes we can think we are helping children, we are serving children, but in actual sense, it could be that we are serving our own interests. For instance, when we say a child, the parents, the family is unable to provide for his or her education, and we say we are taking the child away from the family into the institution for purposes of education, then we should be asking ourselves, whose interest does this serve? And is it that the child's best interest is to remain in the family and is cared for, offered the education support from the family, where he is able to enjoy other relations with the siblings, with the parents, and so on, or rather, it is the best interest for the child to be detached from the family and get into the institution. So it's about maximizing the well-being, maximizing the welfare of the child. That's what best interest underlines as a principle. There are also a set of questions I can attempt to respond to, explaining a community-based child protection. We appreciate that in communities, I think it was Sister Tessa who pointed out that it takes a village and a community to raise a child. Yes, that is it. But also we know that as communities become, as individuals become quite individualistic, and as social relations become commercialized, somehow we get to lose that moral. But we acknowledge that within communities, there are structures. There are structures that are sometimes obliged by law, or at least their roles are defined in as far as child protection is concerned. For instance, the local leaders could identify cases, child protection cases. They could work with other community-based structures to identify these cases or to respond to such cases, which may not be very severe, and those that are severe, they are able to report as much as possible, as fast as possible. And then in some cases, we have community members of high moral authority who are identified as people who can offer care for children instead of children who are unable to be cared for by the parents ending up in institutions. These people stand in the gap, they close the gap and say, okay, let us take care of this child. Meanwhile, as the issues in the family are being sorted for the child to get back in the community. So besides these structures identifying cases, handling cases and reporting, they also offer accommodation, they offer space, they have families, they take in children, and also they supervise people who have taken on care of children on behalf of the government structures, like the social welfare officers, because they are close to the communities. So that partly constitutes community-based care for children. I don't know whether I can say something about children with disabilities. Somebody has asked a question about children with disabilities, that yes, we acknowledge that the family is the best place, but what about children with disabilities? Yes. Even children with disabilities, they deserve to live within the family. Maybe the first thing we should understand, what are their unique needs that may deny them from being within their families? Sometimes they need rehabilitation services. Sometimes they need specialized care. And the argument is that when these children are offered specialized care, maybe in institutions, the family should be involved in the rehabilitation process. Family members should be part and parcel of the rehabilitation process, maybe in hospitals, maybe in the institutions, the childcare institutions for children with disabilities. They should be involved. They should not be seen to be home where the children are in institutions undergoing rehabilitation, because at the end, we need the children to get back to the family. If they have not been part of the rehabilitation process, then it means they will not be able to care for these children, even when some correction services have been done on the child. So that's very important. And not just the parents, but even the siblings. They need to know the their siblings' needs. And so the whole rehabilitation process should be very involving, rather than thinking that because the children have unique needs that the family cannot take care of, they can simply take the children into the institution. And if the family has money, they simply even pay money to the institution to care for the child when in the institution. No, they need to be part of the rehabilitation process. They should be part of identifying the unique needs of the child and come up with the care plan. Come up with the care plans for this child, which in the event that the child gets back to the family, the institution simply supports in supervision and offer backup support, rather than children losing family care and being taken up by the institution for good. For now, thank you. I could respond to other questions as time goes by. Thank you.
I don't know if the other speakers would like to add something.
I would like to make a plea for the truth, that children are able to handle the truth, depending on the developmental age that they are. But so often we try to hide things or sugarcoat. And I know this is an issue when children are in foster care, their mothers or fathers are arrested. Very often people say, oh, your mother's sick, she's in the hospital, she's this, that. You know, children can really have great resilience. And I think in the care, the children that we all work with in our various sites, that as long as we're open with them and we tell them the truth, then they can deal with that more realistically, and their expectations move them along, so that, yes, your mother is here now with the hopes that someday you'll, you know, within the next 3 months, and you show them a calendar or do whatever you have to do, that there will be opportunities to reunite. Or they cannot reunite, that maybe because of some physical ailment or some mental health issue with families, there will be no opportunity to reunite with a biological family, but we're working on an aunt, or we're working on another relative for your care, so that they're engaged in their own future. We all want that for ourselves. And whether a child is 5, 15, or 55, we all like to be engaged in our own creation of our future.
Thank you very much. While Claudia will gather the questions in the chat, that there are a lot, we will try to give the floor to some sisters on live. So Winnie Mutuku, you have the floor and you can unmute your microphone if you like. Winnie Mutuku.
Yes, thanks very much. I just want to ask a question to Dr. Ronald. I'm not sure if I have to say the name. You have already said it. I work with the street children in Kitale, which is in Kenya, one part of western part of Kenya. And as it is a new project, but I find this program very helpful for me, especially speaking about family reintegration and support, because this is what we are looking at. This is the objective of Upendo Street Children project, which is just in Kenya, started recently this year. But my question, I'm not sure whether I'm asking a question or I'm just pointing a bit of challenges to the first presentation that was done by Dr. Ronald. I'm concerned about the home reintegration, which is what we call it here in our case, for example. Now, one of the challenges we have is we work with a certain age, 15 to 18. And as it is right now, all of them are boys, because rarely you're able to find girls in the streets. Now, there are other cases, there are other situations which I have not gotten into. But the challenge that we are getting with this situation is that even the processes of home tracing for you to place them with their families is not a walk in the park. Because in the streets, they use different languages, they have stage names in the streets. And what we run is not particularly a home. We run a dropping center, which is what we call day shelter, where we process them every morning. When they come, we engage them in the activities, informal activities for rehabilitation, in preparation for reintegration. But I can tell you that is not easy. So I'm wondering, when you're talking about family care, family support, that is when the child has already gone home. What other options are there for, suppose, the families that are broken down, in the sense that even when you take the child home, they are ready to stay, but that just happens for a while.
Thank you, sister.
And then they follow you back in the streets. So I'm just wondering what to do with this procedure. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, because I would like to give the floor to other people before giving the floor to the Ronald again, so we can gather some questions more. And I have Rona, who asked the floor, raise the hands. You have the floor. Rona Bueda. Please be very short. Rona, you have the floor.
Thank you very much.
No, Ronald, just a second. I'm giving the floor to some sisters before. We gather some questions, then we leave the last word to all of you, the speakers.
Okay.
Okay, Nirmala, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Thank you, all the three presenters. I really enjoyed listening to all three of you. And I attended the previous one. I find this one, yes, that was informative. This was very practical one. Thank you for the organizers also. My question is that I'm a Loreto sister in India. We have about 10 homes, 7 homes, 6 homes are there for the street children, where we have 150 children to say 110 children, all those children from the street, most of them from the street of Kolkata. So now when it comes to the street, they don't know shelter for their homes. They have no homes on the street. So how do we talk about this concept of community-based, child protection? How do we apply this concept? That's my question. First question. I have 2-3 questions, but this is my first question. Another question is that when it comes to we have a boarding, which is semi-orphan one boarding, which has been running for last 175 years, many years. So now we are dialoguing about this concept of going into family care. So is there anybody who are professional we can approach and they can guide us in this, in this concept of, I have seen SOS villages here, but this family care concept may be a little more, if anybody is there for professional help. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, sister. I would like to leave the floor to Claudia just for other 2 questions, and then we'll leave the floor to the speakers for a final comment and answers. Sister Niluka, you can tell them how many time they have to answer. Claudia.
Thank you, Patrizia. So next 2 questions I'm trying to put together. The first one is, a word we have heard much today is transit, as well as temporary. A question about this: how to make so that the transition from a center or a community, or even a temporary family-like community to a family, especially if this will not be the biological one, is not traumatic for the child? And also, the point is clear that family-type care is preferable to institutional care. However, I realize that children with disabilities may need specialist care for their own needs, as well as for the needs of their siblings. So if it is possible to comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And just for people to know that we will take care of the questions and perhaps we will able to answer in the following webinar. Sister Niluka?
Yes, we have 10 minutes. And actually, I like to give 2 minutes for each speaker to answer. And is it okay? Hello?
Yes, I think it's
I think it's
okay,
okay.
Ronald.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you please start, Ronald?
All
Yes.
right. Thank you very much. I will start with a question that has been asked by Winnie Mutuku. Winnie says they are running a drop-in center. Yes. I think what I find to be a missing link in the model that is being implemented by Winnie and her organization is what we could call tailor-made training for these children as they are weaned off from the street into the drop-in centers, and they are rehabilitated for reunification into the families. Remember, these are children who have tasted independence on the streets. And therefore, it is not enough to rehabilitate them and take them into the families. Their demands are high. They have tested independence. The families cannot accommodate the demands. So the process of rehabilitation should incorporate tailor-made trainings, which gives them independent living, such that whether they get back to their families or they start their independent lives, they will be able to see that that is an alternative to being on the street where they have tasted independence and especially economic independence. So I suggest tailor-made training. And maybe the other one is about professional help. I want to imagine that in the different countries, the responsible ministries for child welfare have got professionals, both at the national level, at the ministry level. If the country is a federal state, then at the federal level and the local government levels. So it's a question of exploring who those professionals are, especially in regard to child welfare, and you establish networks. Remember, the work you are doing is more of gap filling. They should be the persons doing this job, but you are helping to fill their gap. So you need to interface with them at the different levels. Thank you very much.
Sister Tisa?
Yeah, just on the point of the trauma involved in transitions, change is challenging to every one of us, no matter how old we are. But I think the more communication can be given, an explanation as to what to expect, can help some of that. You're never going to take the trauma out of change. And for children who are not trusting, have really not developed good relationships or bonds with people. So it only can be done in small steps. And I think if we're realistic to celebrate the small steps, whether it's being able to sit and eat at a breakfast table with someone, or even just to say thank you or ask questions, that's what we can expect. And do everything possible to make that transition easier by becoming familiar with the child's needs, the child's likes, and then walking with them through it, and knowing there are going to be moments of really intense, maybe expressions of fear and trauma, but to deal with them. And the point was made very well by Doctor that, you know, this all involves training, that we're not talking about working with people who are just thrown into this. There has to be a real schedule of training, professionalism involved in having to help deal with children and with adults, how to deal with the adults that we're dealing with, who are equally traumatized by this reunification.
Sister Shamindani?
I would like to respond to the questions that the sister asked, how we can get the professional help. Actually, according to our experience, we got a lot of support from the congregational level and also the regional wise to have a strategy plan and also to plan out in this transition whole process. Because before us, the other countries or other units were had much experience regarding this community-based child protection programs. And so that we were able to get more expertise from the congregation itself. So that was a kind of a great support for us. Thank you. I think most of the questions were answered, and thank you so much.
We have already reached to the end of this webinar. Before ending, I want to thank our three guest speakers of today, Dr. Ruangula, Sister Tisa, and Sister Shamindani. We are really privileged to have three of you in our midst today, and we appreciate your commitment in bringing changes in the way we religious care for children and vulnerable persons in our society. You inspired us and energized us. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the very best for your work. Now I invite Sister Yolanta Kafka to wind up today's program. The President of UISG, Sister Yolanta Kafka.
Welcome everyone. I was following not fully the meeting, but I was following always the preparation of this. I am Sister Yolanda. At present, I am the President of the Union. And I am so glad listening to the presentations and to the experiences that have enlightened these presentations. Because as we are beginning with the CCCI, we know that we are not only making a vision, but while we are making the vision, we are trying to visualize, to make it visible. So when we see the experiences and the process that are examples, and there are real concrete steps that they have been done, this is what we can see together. Oh, this way is possible. So I am very grateful to Dr. Ronald, to Sister Tesa, to Sister Shamindani for their presentation and also for the questions, because the questions have enlightened also the curiosity and where to focus in our continuation of the training. One of the things that struck me today was also the word transition. And I found very meaningful one of the transitions you have mentioned here, the transition from the lack of trust for change or in the change to the trust in the possibility of change. Okay, so this resistance that Sister Shimantini was speaking about, when the project is vision out, but we should also work in involving others in the same sensitivity, putting at the center the child. Okay, this will help to accompany this process of transition from the lack of trust in the change to the possibility of change. And I agree with all of you that for this we need, of course, a very warm-up heart with care and of compassion, but we need also a professional, a skilled preparation, which is grounded in us by knowledge, by skills, etc. So in this very beginnings of our webinars and process, I am very grateful to Sister Niluka, Sister Kathleen, and of course Claudia to lead this seminar, and GHR for assisting us in creating the possibility of means, and the examples that we shared, each one of you made possible. So I'm very grateful again and thank you. May God bless our steps, and may many children be able to grow in the safe environment, family-like environment for the future of the world, of our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Yolanda. Thank you, dear friends, for your active participation in this webinar. Thanks to Sister Pat, Sister Yolanda, Patricia, Sister Teresa, Kathleen, for your support towards this end. I appreciate your support and commitment while journeying in the path of Catholic care for children. So let's keep one another in our prayers as we journey together to make our world a better place for the children and vulnerable persons. So stay safe and well until we see you soon. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Sister
you.
Shamandani, I have asked you for your email ID. If you don't mind, could you please type it in the chat box, your email ID, please? I'm very, I haven't got the full clear concept of community-based child protection. I'm interested. Please type your email ID.